Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me. Whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, I just appreciate you watching. As we're getting started today, just a reminder that you'll want to go back and look at the announcement from last Thursday, Friday-ish. Whenever it was, I believe it was Friday when I posted the announcement that had, talking about the new module, which is module 6 that we're in now. We're talking about links, lists, and multimedia. But, as I was kind of going through and doing my early assessment of some of the module 5 labs that got turned in, I saw some issues kind of creep up. And since this is the same lab that we're going to be using in modules 6, 7, 8, and 9, we're just going to be kind of adding to it along the way. You're going to want to make sure that you take some of these things that are issues and you're going to want to make sure you fix them. So I want to make sure that everybody goes back and looks at that and sees that information and fixes it. Right, and that we kind of understand this material and understand the basics that we're working with here, right? That we have web standards that we're being held to here, even though it might work, and that's all well and good, right? That it works. It's not to standard, which causes an issue in and of itself, but even still, when it is not to standard, if it's working now, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll work in the future, right? Like when we have other things like CSS and JavaScript that rely on the structure of HTML to function and to integrate with the website properly. If we allow too many errors and too many non-standard bits of code into our sites at this point early on, then we very well could end up with major problems down the road as we get to more advanced, more complex, or just different stuff. Right? So we want to make sure, especially those items that I listed in that announcement last Friday, we want to make sure that we are going back, looking at our lab for module 5 and fixing those things. That's going to be key to ensuring our success both now and in the near future as we are building on this site and adding more to it. Also, it was nice to see a couple of you at the advising day today, for those of you who could make it. If you were unable to make it, if you were in one of our information technology programs here at Cleveland Community College, we want to make sure that you know what you're taking in the spring. Spring registration is next week. Or it opens for returning students next week, so we want to make sure that you have an understanding of what you're supposed to be taking in the spring. If you are a programming and web development student, please get in touch with me. I can help you determine the classes that you need to be taking in the spring. And we can also work to get an appointment set up with Miss Clayton so that you can get some forms filled out and get everything that you need registered for the spring, so we can make sure that you stay on track and you're making good progress for your degree completion. So those are our big announcements for this week. We are talking about HTML today, and we're talking about links, lists, and multimedia. And I'd like to cover as much of this as possible. Might not have time to do all of it in our hour that we have here, although it is all covered in the module. So it's not quite as big of a deal there as it might be otherwise. That is one of the things that I try to do with these live classes is I try to reinforce and show different examples of different things that are in the live classes. Or I should rephrase that. I try to show examples of things in these live classes that are in the modules and try to teach them in a bit of a different way, just so we can reinforce those topics and we can have a different way of learning them. Right? Because we aren't necessarily covering all of those topics in there, or we are, right? Just some of it's in text, maybe in the module, and then I come in here and I talk about it, or, vice versa, right? So, that's the kind of thing that we're doing here. So we'll go as far as we can here over the course of the next hour, and we'll work with links, and we'll work with lists, and we'll work with multimedia. I'll show you Cloudinary, and we'll work in Cloudinary a little bit. I really like to use Cloudinary for multimedia. We'll want to make sure that we spend some time there before we end our live stream today, because it is a really neat and useful website that we can use for multimedia hosting. But we'll start off talking about links. That's our first big thing here. And these are kind of the big things that everybody wants to know, right? So what is a link? So in HTML, we use our A tag, which is an anchor tag. A stands for anchor. And this tag defines a hyperlink, which is used to link from one page to another, right? So there are different types of links. There are internal links and there are external links. Typically, when we are, linking from one page to another page on a singular website, we use an internal link. When we are linking from one page to a page that's on a completely separate website, we will use an external link. And we'll do an example of both of those here in just a moment. But the most important attribute that we'll be looking at with our anchor tag element, our A element, is the href attribute. href, our href attribute. And that indicates our link's destination, or where we want our user to go. So as we're creating a link, we would give it an attribute of href, and we're going to set that equal to whatever website or whatever page on our site we want our user to be able to go to. And so by default, our links have some default styling in future classes, and really, a little bit in this class when we start talking about CSS. We talk about how to style these links. But by default, an unvisited link, a link that you've never been to before, is underlined and blue in color. Right, which is why we say that we don't really want to make just regular text on a website to be underlined and blue in color, because then it looks like a link. So by default, somebody might think that something's a link if it looks like a link when it might not be clickable. Right? A visited link, or a link that you've already clicked on and went to that site, is underlined and purple in color. Right, so you've probably seen that before, right? After you've clicked a link on a page and then went back to that page, you might have noticed, hey, that link isn't blue anymore. That link's now purple. And that's to give you a visual signifier that you've visited that link. So I've already been there. maybe I don't need to go back, or maybe I have already been there. That's the site I need to use, right? It just gives you this bit of a visual signifier of the fact that you've already visited that link. And an active link, which is a link that you are currently in the process of clicking on. So you really only see this state of our link for just a split second, right? Because we click on a link, and once we let go of our mouse button, the active link kind of goes away. Right? But an active link is underlined and red in color. So when you are in the active process of clicking on a link, just to give you a bit of a signifier that you are clicking on this link and it is in fact doing something, it changes to another different color based on that. So I'm going to head over to a Replit here really quickly, just so we can work with some links for a bit. This is just a standard Replit. Let's again talk about some things that we need to keep, some things that we can delete. This script src equals https://replit.com/public/js. We can delete this line here, which is currently my line 20. We can delete these comments here. We want to keep this script here on line 13. Right, so if you accidentally deleted this script src equals script.js, you want to make sure to add that back later on. Remember that that's what links it to this script.js file, which we'll be using later on. And we want to keep everything that's in the head of our document here. So we can delete this hello world text right here in our body as well. Everything else we can keep. So let's link to something. Let's link to the Cleveland Community College website. And so if we go to the Cleveland Community College website, right, we can see up here in the URL bar, we have our Cleveland Community College website. I can just go ahead and right click and select copy. And we can copy that page there. And so on my website, I'm going to start out by writing my anchor tag. So we're going to use my less than symbol and A. Now notice I haven't put my greater than symbol yet. When I'm using attributes, my attributes go inside of my opening tag. Remember, one of the things that we've talked about previously is that, for the majority of HTML tags, I have an opening tag and I have a closing tag, right? And that is no different here with our anchor tag. So I have an opening anchor tag and I have a closing anchor tag. And I have these attributes that I want to put in my opening anchor tag. So I'm going to put them before the greater than sign that ends my opening anchor tag, right? Like if we look at my opening body tag here on line 11, you see that I have a less than sign, the word body, and the greater than sign at the end. Normally for my opening anchor tag, if I didn't have any attributes that I wanted to put in there, I would just put my less than sign, my A for anchor, and my greater than sign there at the end. However, since I have attributes, my attributes go in the opening tag. And so my most important attribute here is my href attribute, href. And we are going to set that equal to, in quotes, the link, the complete link to go to clevelandcc.edu. And once we have that, we can put our greater than symbol at the end of that. And then if I wanted to, I can go ahead and put my /A closing anchor tag there. Now, I have a link here, right? This is going to work as a link, but I don't have any text here, right? Like if I run my site here, there's no text on my site. The text that I want to display my link as needs to go between my anchor tags here, right? Just like when we were doing H1s and paragraphs, last week, where whenever we wanted this this particular text to be our H1, we put it in between the opening H1 and the closing H1. When I want some text to be linked, I put that text between my opening and closing anchor tags here, and that will give me my link on my screen now. So I can go ahead and click to open a new tab to pop this out on a new window. And once I click this link here, we'll see that it'll open up the link to the Cleveland Community College website here in the same window. Now, that's not necessarily something that I would want to do here, since this is an external link, right? This is a link to another website that is not my website. Right, my website is the one that's on my REPL here. It's not clevelandcc.edu. So since I'm taking this person off of my website and onto some other website, what I might want to do is open this website in a new tab. So we can actually do that by adding another attribute into our opening anchor tag. So if I go here after this closing quote, after .edu, closing quote, before my greater than symbol, and add another attribute of target equals. Let me move around here so you all can see that. Target equals, and in quotes, underscore, which is shift, and the key that's right beside the 0 key there on your numbers. Right, it's the dash if you don't shift, and then if you shift, it's the underscore. Blank. Target equals underscore blank. And so if we look at this all kind of on one line here, I'll try to move this over so we can kind of see this all on one line. And you can see it all together here. We can see that, I have a space here between my href and my target. It's all contained between the less than symbol and the greater than symbol inside of my opening A tag. Right, and if we run that now, we see, okay, Cleveland Community College. And if we pop that out, we can see now my website's still open here. It did not replace that website. It opened it in a new tab, right? Like I can click that there and we see it open in a new tab. Typically the other way, what we would use that for would be if we were to use an internal link. So if I had another page on my website. So for example, if I had to add a file here, I could add a file called lists, maybe lists.html. And we'll go ahead and put our HTML skeleton on here. And maybe we'll add some other information to that later on when we get to talking about lists. If I wanted to link to this page, right, since this page is in the same folder as my index.html, I can create another link here. Right, I'm going to add a less than br / greater than for a break here. And I'm going to include an href equals lists.html. And so since these two files are in the same folder, I can just link to the file name and have my information done that way. And I wouldn't want to add the target of blank here since I'm on the same site. I would add some text like lists page and then a /a. Right? So now if I have this, I can go to my lists page. It's on the same site, so it's fine. What we might want to do here, though, is we might want to add a link to go back to the home page, which in this case is index.html. So we can just link back to the index.html file. And add in home page here at the top of that. That way we have a way to get back. So now we can kind of toggle back and forth between list page and home page. Right, we can see it there. And if we go over here, we can see it here as well. Right, so those are two different types of links that we can do. Right, really simple, really easy. Good examples for making links here. The next thing that's on our agenda is to look at the idea of lists. So we'll make some lists and we'll do them on our lists page here. And so just what exactly is a list? A list is, part of everyday life here. To-do lists kind of determine what we get done, right? We kind of wake up in the morning and we make a list in our heads and we say, well, okay, today this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this and this and this. Even if it's just kind of our daily routine, right? We kind of get up and we do something. Right, where we make a list. And there are different kinds of lists that we follow day by day, right? Like if we're going somewhere new and we need directions to get to wherever we're going, right? We need these turn-by-turn directions. And so these turn-by-turn directions are a different type of list than you might encounter if you were to do a grocery list, right? Because turn-by-turn directions have to be done in a specific order, right? Like you can't start at direction number 1 and then jump down to direction number 4, right? But if if I have a grocery list of items that I need to get at the store, I can definitely start with one item and then maybe skip down and get the third or fourth item on the list and then go back up and get the second or third item on the list. I don't have to get them in any particular order. So we have these different types of lists. That we can follow and use on a day-to-day basis. And oftentimes, we will use lists on a website for similar purposes. Right? And there are 3 types of lists primarily that we use on a website. These are unordered lists, ordered lists, and description lists. For our purposes in this course, we're going to focus on unordered lists and ordered lists. And when we're choosing to use a list to organize the information on our site, we want to make sure that we are choosing a list that will be the most semantically appropriate option for displaying the content that we are trying to display. Right? So for example, if it's like those turn-by-turn directions that I talked about where everything has to be done in a specific order, an ordered list is the most appropriate. right? Or for example, like a recipe, where the steps of the recipe have to be followed in a specific order. An ordered list is more appropriate if it's something where the order really doesn't matter and we can kind of do things in whatever order we want to do them. An unordered list is just fine. Right? And oftentimes, we also use unordered lists in conjunction with links to build navigation menus and things of that nature, because it's just a list of links to different parts of our sites. And inside of our list items, we can put any kind of element we want to put there. Which is pretty neat. Text, images, anything. Right? As long as it can fit inside of our list item. So we'll start off by having a look at unordered lists here. An unordered list is simply just a list of sort of related items, right? It's not things that have to be done in any particular order. Right? The example that I always give here is our grocery list. But it could really be anything that, the order of the items doesn't matter. And creating an unordered list in HTML is accomplished using the unordered list block level element, which is a set of UL tags. UL standing for unordered list. So we have a UL opening tag and a UL accompanying closing tag. Each item within an unordered list is individually marked up as a list item element, or LI. So by default, most browsers add a bit of vertical margin and left padding to the UL element and precede each LI element with a solid dot, which we call a disk. And this disk is what we call a list item marker. And we can actually change how this list item marker looks utilizing CSS, which we'll talk about later on. And so in our code, right, if we're going to create an unordered list, it's going to look something like this. Right? You can kind of see this structure in place here. Right? We have our unordered list, an unordered list opening tag, and an unordered list closing tag. And that becomes a container for an unordered list. And then every list item that is inside of that unordered list becomes a singular item that is a part of that list. It becomes an item on that list. An element that gets a little bullet point, gets a little disk beside it, or what have you, right? In this instance, it's just an unordered list of colors. Right? So if we go to the grocery store and we go to the produce section, we might be making an unordered list. So let's head over to our lists page here. I'm going to write us a little H1 here, just so we can get an idea of what this is whenever we're going back to it later. So this is going to be our unordered list. And we're going to start out by adding our unordered list tags. Right? And so in between here, we can add as many list items as we want. LI. And then in between these LI tags, we can add anything. Right? We can make this a paragraph in here. We can just write some text in here. We can put an image in here. We can do whatever we want in here, right? So if I wanted to put an emoji in here, I can do that. Anything that we want can go in between these list items. And each of these list items are going to get their own bullet point. Let's click our list page link here to visit our list page. They're going to get their own bullet point in our unordered list. And so again here, we only use this unordered list when it does not matter what order these items are in. So think grocery list, think maybe packing list if you're going to pack a bunch of items. What else could we be thinking here? Any group of like elements that you need to post a list about that it really doesn't matter what order they're in. But there are types of lists, as we've mentioned, that do require things to be in a particular type of order. And these are ordered lists. And so our ordered lists, basically, they look a whole lot like our unordered lists. Right? Our ordered lists look like our unordered lists. The only real difference is that instead of a UL tag, they have an OL tag. In between of our OL tags, we still have list items. And the big difference between the two here is that because order matters, instead of using a dot as the default list item marker, an ordered list uses numbers. So instead of just a dot denoting different items, our ordered lists would be represented as item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, and so on. Right, so we can see in an ordered list example like this one, it looks very, very similar to the type of code that we would use to create an unordered list, right? The only difference being that instead of unordered list tags, we have ordered list tags. So if we go into our page here, what I'll basically do is I'll just go in here and recreate that same ordered list from that slide there. And I'll just create it here on this live site so you can have it with the recording. We'll add another H1 here just to give a little heading for this ordered lists. We'll put an OL, and in between here we will put some list items. And again, just like with our unordered list, we can put paragraphs in between here, we can put headings in between here, we can put images in between here, or we could just put text in between here, right? Head north on North Halstead Street. That's 1. 2. Turn right on West Diversey Parkway. 3. Turn left on North Orchard Street. Right, so now when we run this, and we click on our little lists page link here, we see, okay, we got our unordered list here. Everything here is represented by our disk marker type. Our ordered list is represented by numbers 1, 2, and 3 because, we have to do them in order. Right? So when we're doing them in order, it makes sense that we have to have an order for them. 1, 2, and 3. Now again, we can put absolutely anything in these list items, even links, right? We can put a list item and we can go href equals https:// www.clevelandcc edu target equals blank Cleveland Community College /A, right? Anything can go between these list item tags. It's just another container. So when we go to the list page, now we just have another list item. We can see it's a list item because it has a little disk beside it that goes to the Cleveland Community College page. And also remember that if our HTML gets a little too jumbled up, another thing that we can do here is that we can just kind of clean up our HTML a little bit. Go around a few places, hit enter a few times, just give it a little bit of breathing room. Right, again, that's something that I really recommend a lot that you all do as you're working on this stuff, just because it's going to make life a whole lot easier, right? Because the easier it is for you to be able to read your code and be able to read the things that you've written, the easier it's going to be for you to be able to find mistakes. And so as we've kind of seen here, that's kind of 2/3 of the big title elements that we need to write for the module, right? We said lists, links, and multimedia, or links, lists, and multimedia. And so those are two big ones right there. Those are our links and our lists. And for those of you who are continuing in programming and web development, or we'll get even deeper into these items in the spring. For now, let's continue on to look at multimedia. So when it comes to adding multimedia, the ability to add images, audio, video, and inline frames or iframes has been around for some time, but with the advent of HTML5, adding audio and video got a lot easier than it used to be. Right? Images and inline frames has always been kind of good, but audio and video has gotten way better. Right, so I think what we're going to do, based on the amount of time that we have left, because I want to spend some time in Cloudinary, just showing you all Cloudinary and how Cloudinary works. I think I'm going to focus using and working with images, and let you all kind of figure out working with audio and video from the module. It's not that hard, and I think we do a decent job explaining it in the module. Good enough to where you can work with it for our purposes. So we're going to start out talking about adding images. So to add images to a page, we use the image inline element. The image inline element. Now, the image element is a self-containing or empty element, which is our first self-containing element, right? Which means that it does not have a closing tag. It is only a singular tag. There is not a closing IMG tag. There is only the one IMG tag. It is a self-contained tag. So for our image element to work, what we need is an SRC or source attribute. And that source attribute must be included to specify where the image lives. And this source attribute is typically going to be a URL. And they're going to look like this. Right, our first example here is if our image is hosted on the same server as our website, right? Like that example there looks pretty similar to where we used our anchor tag to link to a page on our same site. IMG SRC equals dog.jpg. So if we have our picture that's in the same folder as our HTML file, we can link to that picture that way. Now, I would rather you all use Cloudinary. What I don't want you all to do is just link to the image on whatever random server where you find the image. That is bad etiquette. That costs whoever owns that server money. And they probably don't want you doing it. And if they catch you doing it, they could also embarrass you really, really badly. Because you can switch out pictures and make somebody look really, really silly. If somebody else is linking to images that are on your server. Cloudinary, on the other hand, is something called a CDN, a Content Delivery Network. And it is a content delivery network that has the ability to host images for you, right? So this is a service that says, hey, we will do this for you. This is allowed here. It also has some tools built into it that can make our lives a whole lot easier as we're adding images and things onto websites. So it just generally allows us to use these things and be good stewards of the internet as we're building websites. Do things right, if you will, because that's the purpose of something like Cloudinary, is to add images to websites or add media to websites. You can add any type of file to it. So when you're uploading your pictures, when you're uploading your videos, when you're uploading your audio, you would upload it to Cloudinary instead. And then use the link that Cloudinary generates to put it on your site. So if we look at Cloudinary, when you first log in, you'll hit a landing page that looks similar to this. Right? It might not look exactly the same, but it'll look similar. The big thing that you'll want is this link up here at the top of the page that says Media Library. That's where you'll want to go. So I'm going to click on that. And maybe one of the things that you'll want to do first and foremost is create a new folder for this project. I'm going to call this folder CTI 110 Fa22 OL. So now I have a folder for this project. I can double click that folder to enter that folder. So now I need a picture to upload to this site. Typically, if I'm going to use some kind of stock photo or some kind of free photo, on the web, I'm going to use something like unsplash.com, unsplash.com. These are Creative Commons CC0 licensed images, which means they are in the public domain, which means that anybody can use them for free. So if you just need a picture to put on your site that looks kind of nice or whatever, you can come here, you can search these pictures, you can find something that you like that kind of looks nice, and you can download it and you can use it for free. And so I'm going to just search a picture here. I'm just going to search technology and just find something that looks interesting. Here's a picture of some code. Let's see if we can tell what kind of code this is. That is definitely JavaScript. It might be... Or is that PHP? Actually, I think that is... Yeah, I actually think that's PHP. That's strange. It's been a while since I've seen some of that in a stock photo. But I can just take this photo and I can just drag it straight into, from my hard drive straight into my Cloudinary folder, and it will upload it for me. And so now I have it here. And it gives me a lot of information about my image. And if I wanted to, right here, it looks like we have a less than, greater than symbol. That says copy URL. When I hover over it, I can click that and copy URL. Now, there's a problem with this image right now that we'll be able to come back and fix in a moment. But I want to show you what happens if we just copy this URL and take it over to our website here on Replit. Let me move it back in here. And I'm going to put it on our index page. So that is img src equals, and in quotes we will paste that link to our image on Cloudinary. And again, remember our image link is, or our image URL, rather our image element is a self-contained or a self-closing element, which means that there is no closing img, right? This kind of thing right here doesn't exist, right? That's not a thing. So we'll just go ahead and delete that. It's just this one tag. And if we run that by default, we see there's our image, but our image is absolutely enormous. Right? And if we look at Cloudinary, we see why, right? And if we zoom in here on our image here, we see that our image is 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. Huge image. Right? 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. If you think about like 1080p resolution, that's 1,920 pixels by 1,080 pixels, right? So that's like 3 times the size of a 1080p resolution on its own, right? We also see that it is 2.12 megabytes in disk size. right? So that's way too big, right? So one, we want to be respectful to our users. We don't want them to be downloading a full 2.12 megabyte sized image, every time, when they come to our websites. Right? That's what's way too big. That's way too much memory. But also, this picture is just way too big to fit on our site and look good. Cloudinary actually has tools built into it to fix this for us. So I'm actually going to find this 3-dot menu right here, and I'm going to click that. And I'm going to click Edit right here. Right, again, that's the 3-dot menu, and then Edit. Then right here at the top, we see what can I do? I can resize and crop. And as I resize that down, I can take that down and I can make it really, really small. And as I make it really, really small, it's actually resizing the image for me. It's not just making it small with code, it's actually resizing the image for me. And it's giving me a URL to the resized image. So I can just copy this image here and go back and paste it in place of the big image that was in my site. Right, so now we've got this small image right here on my site that we can see very easily. And if I save this image, save image as, we can see that this image is not 2 meg, right? It's only 15K. Much, much smaller, right? The old image we see here on the disk is 2000K. This is just 15K. 15 kilobytes versus 2 megabytes. Huge difference, right? So we're a bit more friendly for people who are accessing our websites on slower connections. We can also do other basic things to our images here to make them kind of interesting. Right, there's a corner radius option here if we want to round the corners of our images. I think that's kind of neat, although I'd rather kind of do that thing in CSS, which we'll talk about in the future. So I'll take that back down to 0. There are some filters here that are kind of neat. Right, so if you need a filter for your image, if you want to change it to, let's see here, this one's called Cartoonify. Let's see what that looks like. It just kind of makes the colors a little bit muddy, it looks like. Probably like a posterize or a cutout filter in Photoshop. If we looked at there's a grayscale filter here if you wanted to change it to a grayscale or black and white image. Right, and this is all just built into Cloudinary for free as part of the free service. Right, you can just do this and it automatically generates the link here for you. Right, you don't have to redo anything here, which is pretty great. Some different filters and different things there that you can try out and play with. With your images. So that's why I really like to use Cloudinary and use it for my sites. One because it's friendlier for my fellow web developers because I'm not using anything on anybody else's servers, right? Cloudinary is made for this kind of thing. It's made to be a host for images and videos and audio and different types of files and things like that. It also allows me to be friendlier to the people that come to visit my site because I can make sure I have a small format file quickly and easily. One of the things that we talk about when we get to CSS is I can take this and I can shrink it down with CSS or I can shrink it down with code, But that's just shrinking down how it looks. That's not actually shrinking down the file size. So I'd be shrinking down how it looks, but it'd still be shrinking, but it would still be downloading the full big file. So if I want to make the file smaller and have it look smaller on the screen anyway, I may as well go ahead and actually make it a physically smaller file. That's only going to make more sense as it goes. And so with that being said, I think that takes us roughly to where we want to be, right? Like that's roughly to the end of our hour. I do have one more thing that I want us to talk about, and that is alt text. Right? So in conjunction with the source attribute, the alt text or alternative text attribute describes the contents of an image, and it describes the purpose of an image that you have, right? So if you are trying to convey information through an image to your users, well, what about for people who can't see, right? That's what this is for. So there are people who use assistive technologies like screen readers who need a different means of conveying or having information conveyed to them. So if you are trying to convey information to your users through an image, we use an alt attribute to be able to convey that information to them. It's just alt equals and then in quotes the message that we or information that we want to convey to our users through this image, right? We want to, it's what we want our users to get from the image, not just, a description of the image itself, right? Which in some instances it could just be a description of the image, right? Because it could just be that we want somebody to see kind of what something looks like. In other instances, it could be something very different that we want somebody to get out of an image. And in future classes, we go in way deep into accessibility, right? Which is what this is all about. Well, an example of alt text would look like this, right? We see alt equals and then in quotes there, the message that we want to convey. And if it is purely decorative, if it has no real message to convey, what we would do in that instance is we would just leave them empty. Right? We would just say alt equals empty quotes. And that would mean that there is no message to convey by this. This is just for visual decoration. It has no meaning otherwise. Right? That's what that's for. And so that's all that I have for you for today. We're roughly at the 1 hour mark, so I think we're good there. Right? That gets us right basically where we want to be, since we're not going to, that's basically at the end of images there without getting into audio and video, which we have covered in the module. So you'll want to visit your module for that information. I will hang out in the chat for just a couple minutes, just in case anybody who's watching with me live has any questions. If you are watching the recording and you have a question, please send me an email or a Teams message, whatever you wish to do to get that question out to me there. But as always, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.